first graders. I hope you're having a really good time learning about honeybees today and learning about honeybees this week. We are going to do a really fun science experiment. It's a really yummy science experiment too. And that is why I asked you to have some Cheetos ready for today, because we're going to use some Cheetos for our science experiment. So the first thing you're going to need to do your science experiment is you're going to need some flowers. I still have a little bit of snow on my ground when I'm making this video right now. There's still a little bit of snow on the ground, so it's going to be hard to go out and get some real flowers. So what I want you to do is I want you to make yourself 4 flowers for your experiment. Now, they need to be big, and the middle of your flowers need to be big enough to put your Cheetos. Your Cheetos are going to be stored on the middle of your flowers. So when you draw your flowers, take up your whole page like this. Then in the middle, now I had a paper plate. You don't need a paper plate. You could just use another piece of paper, or even a napkin would do. You could do a napkin in the middle. Okay, but just to be fun, because you know Mrs. Mann likes to draw in color, I put a flower on the middle of my plate. Don't have to do that. So you can put a napkin here, you can put a paper towel here, whatever you want in the middle, but you're going to have something in the middle, okay? You're going to take your flowers, and you're going to place them right around your middle piece right here, okay? So there's my flowers. I guess I could have cleaned up over there, sorry. And put another flower here, another flower here, and another flower here. So I have 4 flowers around the outside, and then I have my flower on the inside. Once you have your flowers arranged just like that, the next step is to open up your Cheetos. You're going to have to try to resist eating your Cheetos. You can eat them later. Okay, you're going to open up your Cheetos. Okay, and then you're going to put a handful of Cheetos in the middle of each of your flowers. Okay, you don't have to count them out or anything. You're just going to put them in the middle of each of your flowers. All right. Okay. Once you have each of your flowers, just the middle covered with your Cheetos, you're just about ready for your experiment. Okay. Keep them in the middle. That's part of the experiment. All right. Now, here's what my flowers look like now. Okay. My Cheetos on the middle of the flowers. All right. Now, the next step is to become a pollinator. Now, our story didn't really talk to us about the word pollinators. So Mrs. Mann's going to talk to you about it now. So a pollinator is any little insect or animal that can help move pollen from one flower to another flower. And we didn't see any pictures of real live bees in our story or in the cartoon today. So during our 2:15 meeting, Mrs. Mann and Mrs. Moore will show you some pictures of some bees that are magnified so that you can see the pollen that gets stuck on their legs. But in our story, you saw illustrations where the bees had pollen stuck on their legs. So those bees are acting as what we call pollinators. And that means they take pollen, or the powdery yellow stuff that's in the middle of one flower, and that's what you see in the middle of the flowers. The yellow stuff, the powdery stuff that's in the middle of flowers, and it's not always yellow. Sometimes it's orange, but the powdery stuff is what we call pollen. And in the story that we read this week, you saw little bunches of yellow stuff stuck to the bees' legs, okay? So we're gonna try to move the pollen from one flower to another flower. Now, why would we do this, okay? Flowers, in order to make new flowers, have to make seeds. In order to make seeds, a flower needs the pollen from another flower. It's kind of like how mommy and daddy make babies, but the flowers can't move around and get pollen from another flower. They need help. So the bees have to take the pollen from one flower, carry it over to the other flower, and then that flower is able to make seeds or make new flowers, make new little baby flowers. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give these flowers some help transferring some pollen. Now, I'm a mommy, and I know that when kids eat Cheetos, they make messes, and the Cheetos get all over your fingers, and you like to take your fingers and rub them on your clothes, and you get Cheetos everywhere. That's going to come in handy with this science experiment. So here's what we're going to do. okay? You're going to pick a flower to start with, okay? You're going to pick one of your flowers to start with, and you're always going to move in the same circle, okay? Now, I'm going to pick up a Cheeto here. I'm going to rub it around. Now, these are the bees. This is the bee landing here, and you just read about how bees will land in flowers, and they'll suck up the nectar out of the flowers, and then before they fly over to the next flower, they have pollen that gets stuck on their legs. So I'm going to take a Cheeto from here. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. And then on the 4th flower, I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to rub my fingers on that flower. Okay, and you'll see, when you do that, you'll see some pollen stuck to that flower. Okay, every time I fly to 3 flowers, I'm going to rub my fingers on the 4th one. So 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to rub my fingers on that 3rd paper. 1, 2, 3, rub, rub, rub. 1, 2, 3, rub, 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 rub. 1, 2, 3. And just keep flying around and keep rubbing that pollen off on the flowers. 3. Rub it, rub it, rub it. 1. And really get some of that powder off of there. All that pollen coming off on your fingers. 2, 3. Rub some powder, rub some pollen over there. 1, 2, 3. And then rub some pollen over here. Take some pollen here and some pollen here. And those bees are flying. I'm flying from this flower to this flower. And then I'm going to rub some pollen over here. And you're just going to keep flying around from flower to flower, getting more pollen, more pollen, more pollen. Okay? And then you're going to keep rubbing that off. That's the kind of stuff that you like to rub on your hands when you're eating Cheetos. And your moms and grandmas and papas probably get upset about that. You keep flying around from flower to flower, getting yourself some pollen. And every 3rd flower, you're going to rub that pollen on your flower. Okay? You're going to keep doing this until you get all the pollen off of your hands, or off of the flowers, I should say. Okay? And then, when you have all the pollen picked up off all the flowers, oh, I keep forgetting to rub my hands off. Don't rub them on your clothes. You have to rub them on the flowers because that's what makes you a pollinator. Okay, just gonna rub here. Okay, gotta get that pollen off my hands. Rub some over here. Get that pollen off my hands. Take some over here. Get that pollen off my hands. I shouldn't say off my hands, off my legs, because we're bumblebees, remember? Almost all the pollen off of that flower. Rub the pollen off my hands, legs, I mean, off my little bee legs. Oh, got all the pollen off of there, so I gotta rub my little bee legs off here. Got all the flowers, all the pollen off of here. Let me rub my little bee legs off here. All the pollen off of here. And then I can rub my little bee legs off. Oh my goodness, look at all the pollen on my fingers. That's a lot of pollen. Okay, so when the bees from one flower to the other flower, you can see how it leaves some pollen behind. So what's going to happen is the pollen that comes from this flower, the bee flies on this flower and he sucks up the nectar out of the flower. That's what he's taking back to his hive to make honey with. So the nectar that he takes from this flower is going to help the bees back in the hive make honey. But then when he lands on this flower to suck the nectar out of that flower, this pollen that's left on his little legs is going to fall down in this flower when he's sucking up the nectar. Now the pollen from this flower is going to get inside of this flower, and that's how this flower makes seeds or makes baby flowers. And they wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for pollinators like bees, butterflies, ladybugs, sometimes even little bats that come out at night. All of those things are pollinators, and you became a pollinator today by flying from one flower to the next. That is how flowers make seeds. See that pollen? Here. See the pollen on that flower? It's kind of hard. Oh, now you can see it. See the pollen there? Oh, look. I left pollen there. Okay. That is the pollen that gets inside of this flower. Okay. Now, the best part of this experiment is to eat all of the pollen when you're finished. But don't rub your fingers on your clothes. Okay? All right. I will talk to you soon.